Europe pledges support for Ukraine in war, but seeks diplomatic ways out. The key backers of Kyiv want to demonstrate unity at Munich Security Conference, while warning of limits to their military support. Munich, European leaders put on a show of unity on Friday, stressing their support for Ukraine against Russian aggression, while also seeking possible negotiated paths to end the conflict. Meeting at the Munich Security Conference, a global security and foreign policy forum, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and French President Emmanuel Macron pledged continued support for Ukraine, but signaled they had no intention to supply Kyiv with new weapons systems. Mr. Macron said that the time for peace had not yet come, and that Russia must not win the war, but he warned that there would be no lasting peace without a negotiated settlement with Russian President Vladimir Putin, something Kyiv has ruled out. The remarks come amid what Western officials believe to be a pivotal time in the war. They think Russia has begun a fresh offensive in parts of Ukraine in a bid to break a months-long stalemate that has seen both sides suffer heavy losses with few territorial gains or losses. French President Emmanuel Macron, on the right, who emphasizes the need for a diplomatic solution to the war, met with Christoph Heusgen, chairman of the Munich Security Conference. The Munich conference takes days before the first anniversary of Russia's attack on Ukraine on February 24, 2022, and ahead of a visit to Poland by President Biden next week to coincide with that anniversary. In a sign of potential fatigue in the West's military support for Ukraine, a European initiative to provide Western-made main battle tanks to Kyiv is struggling to get off the ground, dimming hopes that the tanks could be used to counter Russian onslaught. French and German officials said Friday that the two countries would backstop existing weapons systems that they had sent to Ukraine, but insisted that there won't be any further escalation in the type of military hardware they will supply, a rebuttal to Kyiv's pleas for Western warplanes. A French official said that Paris would send more howitzers and light tanks, but had no plans to send heavy tanks, or jets hardware that could be used to attack Russian territory. British officials have said they are considering Ukraine's request for jet fighters, and have pledged to start training Ukrainian pilots to fly them in the spring. However, British officials are signaling that these could be for Ukraine's post-war defense rather than for the current war.
Every day that passes, Russian forces inflict yet more pain and suffering. Now, the only way to change that is for Ukraine to win. So, we need a military strategy for Ukraine to gain a decisive advantage on the battlefield, to win the war, and a political strategy to win the peace. To win the war, Ukraine needs more artillery, armoured vehicles, and air defence. So now is the moment to double down on our military support. When Putin started this war, he gambled that our resolve would falter. Even now, he is betting that we will lose our nerve. But we proved him wrong then, and we will prove him wrong now. Together, we're delivering as much equipment in the next few months as in the whole of 2022. And together, we must help Ukraine to shield its cities from Russian bombs and Iranian drones. And that's why the United Kingdom will be the first country to provide Ukraine with longer-range weapons. And it's why we're working with our allies to give Ukraine the most advanced air defence systems and build the air force they need to defend their nation. Now, of course, the United Kingdom stands ready to help any country provide planes that Ukraine can use today. But we must also train Ukrainian pilots to use the most advanced jet.
Mr. Scholz said the first German-made Leopard tanks should arrive in Ukraine very soon, with German forces currently training Ukrainian soldiers to use them. The Chancellor approved the shipment of tanks last month, freeing the neighboring countries to transfer Leopard tanks from their own stocks to Ukraine. But few have said they would do so despite repeated pleas by Mr. Scholz for them to join the initiative. As a result, the original plan to send 2 battalions of Leopard tanks has been temporarily abandoned, these officials said. When asked about why the tank delivery was stalling, Mr. Scholz said that this was a question for leaders who had previously been urging him to give a permission to export the tanks, but have since been unable to provide any. I hope more will join, he said. He also said the West must focus on permanent production of the most important weapons being used in the war, including ammunition, which Ukraine is rapidly running out of, and the West is struggling to.
The European Union wants weapon manufacturers to maintain stable production in order to continue to provide Ukraine with military aid. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has proposed to offer manufacturers an upfront payment and called for world leaders to step up.
I think it's now the time really to speed up the production and to scale up the production of standardized products that Ukraine needs desperately. For example, the standardized ammunition. It cannot be that we have to wait months and years till we are able to replenish or till we are able to deliver that to Ukraine.
Meanwhile, US Vice President Kamala Harris denounced Russia's crimes against humanity in Ukraine. She called for the perpetrators to be brought to justice and insisted the international community has both a moral and a strategic interest in pursuing those crimes.
French officials said that as part of any peace settlement in Ukraine, there would need to be guarantees for Ukraine, but also openness for a serious dialogue with Moscow about a durable security structure in Europe. The question is how to make the new and normal acceptable for them and sustainable for all of us, he said. Mr. Macron was also dismissive of talk that the West should be pursuing regime change in the Kremlin. I don't believe for 1 second in regime change, he said, calling Western efforts to topple unfriendly regimes in recent years a total failure. At the start of the conference, President Volodymyr Zelensky, who was speaking by video conference, recalled his visit to Munich a year ago, almost on the eve of the war. He said he regretted that Western support only came flooding into his country after the Russian tanks started moving in. Mr. Zelensky said that Mr. Putin was banking on further Western military and financial support for Ukraine coming in too slowly as his troops try to gain ground on the battlefield. He appealed to his allies to make sure that didn't happen. There is no alternative to speed because it is speed that lives depend on, he said. The Ukrainian leader said he thought the odds of Belarus coming directly into the war, alongside Russia, remained pretty low because of widespread opposition to the war in the country. And he repeated his country's long-term goals of joining the European Union and becoming a member of NATO.